Hello everyone. So just over 2 weeks ago on Black Friday, I bought Call of Duty Vanguard for 25% off, and for the past 10 days or so, I've been playing the multiplayer a decent amount, and I wanted to make a video just giving all my thoughts on what I like, what I don't like, what I'd like to see added, and to discuss whether overall is the multiplayer in Vanguard better than Modern Warfare. And for this video, do keep in mind I'm just going to be talking about the multiplayer. I'm going to make a separate video talking about the Warzone integration, and another video where I'll give my opinions on campaign and zombies. So diving straight into it, the first thing I noticed when I played my first game of Vanguard was the engine. It feels very similar to Modern Warfare, but there's enough differences to it that it still feels somewhat fresh. For example, you can't slide cancel nearly as much as you can in Modern Warfare. But I'm so happy that they've decided to stick with this engine because the gameplay feels so brilliant in Vanguard. The explosions sound and feel very punchy, the sound when you kill someone is still really satisfying, and the weapons feel brilliant in your hands. So overall, the engine in Vanguard is still incredible, but I think I prefer the Modern Warfare engine. It may just be because I'm so used to it, but I think the engine in Modern Warfare just feels a bit more polished and realistic. Another thing I noticed straight away when I first played Vanguard was that people play way more aggressive than they do in Modern Warfare, and it improves the flow and the pacing of the game so much more. And coming from someone who's played Modern Warfare pretty much all year, I can't tell you how nice it is to see people actually moving around and not being afraid to leave their building where they're mounted on a window. It's so refreshing. And this is because of a lot of reasons, like ghost only working when you're moving, much lower footstep audio, having the ability to have a proper radar, and the structure of the maps as well. And that last thing I mentioned is another huge thing I like about Vanguard: the maps. The maps are absolutely outstanding, and they're one of my favourite things about Vanguard. The maps in Vanguard favour campers much less than they did in Modern Warfare by having the power points in very open and obvious positions, whereas in Modern Warfare the power points were in really obscure positions and they were way harder to counter than they are in Vanguard. There's also lovely little flank routes like this one you're seeing here in Red Star that are just so satisfying to get kills by using. And when I got that kill you just saw there, I just knew I was going to really like this game's maps. I mentioned this in my video talking about Vanguard pre-release, but I'm going to say it again. I really like how much variety there is with these maps. There's maps in Italy, Germany, France, Russia, Japan, North Africa, and the Pacific, and no two maps feel similar to each other at all, which makes the gameplay experience feel so much more fresh. And also, these maps are so much more colourful and vibrant compared to Modern Warfare's dull, grey maps, which is just nicer to look at. Now to talk about two maps in particular, Das Haus and Shipment. This seems to be the equivalent of what Shoot the Ship was in Modern Warfare, so they're most likely going to be the two maps I spend the most time in while camo grinding. I think Das Haus is a pretty good map overall. It's basically like Shoe House but smaller, which I like because the thing that was great about Shoe House in Modern Warfare is that it was a smaller map, but you could still get long shots, which was the only reason I'd go into Shoot House. But even though it was on the smaller side of the maps in Modern Warfare, a lot of the time you'd be running around looking for enemies and you couldn't get nearly as many kills as you get in Shipment. But what I love about Das Haus is that you can not only get as many kills as you get in Shipment, but more for the majority of the time, and yet it still has that big gap in the middle for you to get your long shots. So it's basically just a better Shoe House in my opinion. And as for Shipment, the layout of the containers is definitely better than it is in Modern Warfare, which leads to fewer frustrating deaths, and I really like how you can go outside the map for a short period of time and make really nice flanks, which goes back to what I was saying earlier about the flank routes on the maps in this game. And also, unlike Modern Warfare, where Shipment and Shoe House were the only two viable maps to play if you wanted to get any decent amount of progress while grinding for the Mastery camo, you can get high kill games in pretty much all the maps. Like, I drop at the very least around 30 kills in the majority of games I play. And this is fantastic because while I was grinding for Damascus last year, I literally exclusively played Shoe House and Shipment, and it made the Damascus grind so much more mundane and repetitive than if I played it in multiple different maps. But whenever I tried to play in the other maps, I'd get like 10 kills, so I just couldn't play in them if I wanted to get Damascus anytime this year. But now, even though Das Haus and Shipment are definitely the best maps for getting the highest amount of kills as possible, there isn't as massive of a kill difference between them and the other maps to the point where I feel compelled to only play them. So I'm really looking forward to playing loads of different maps this year instead of just the same two for months on end. Right now, my favourite maps are Red Star, Hotel Royale, Shipment, Numa Numa, Tuscan, Eagle's Nest, Dome, and Das Haus. Moving on, the Gunsmith in Vanguard is something I'm surprised to actually enjoy. For those of you who watched my video about my thoughts on Vanguard pre-release, you'll know that one of the big worries I had about this game was the pick 10 attachment system. I thought it's going to get rid of that magic of making different attachment combinations because one of my favourite parts of Modern Warfare was having to carefully choose 5 attachments for your weapon. And this is definitely true to a certain extent because when you have so many options, each attachment isn't as vital to the build you want and it makes each attachment feel less valuable. But at the same time, I think the Gunsmith this year is much more complex than it was in Modern Warfare, and it's going to take me a long time to get used to it. So I think there's an interesting learning curve with it, and I may not like it later down the road when I get used to it, but for now, I'm enjoying learning about the new system. Also, as much as I tried to make my attachment combinations unique in Modern Warfare, there were a decent amount of builds that were just cookie cutter where certain attachments were just objectively the best, and the Vanguard Gunsmith is much less cookie cutter than Modern Warfare, which I admittedly didn't like at first because when you start the game it's harder to find what the best builds are, but now I'm starting to like that because it allows for much more unique attachment combos. And on the Mastery Camo side of things, apart from some guns camo challenges being bugged at the moment, it's looking very good for the Mastery Camo this year. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the whole Mastery Camo grind in Vanguard because I plan to make a separate video talking about it right before I'm about to go for it, like how I did with Damascus earlier this year, but I will say that Vanguard's Mastery Camo looks a lot less stressful than Damascus was. One thing that's going to make golden weapons so much easier is that they've put the 5 killstreak camo challenge as one of the first ones you unlock, unlike in Modern Warfare where the 3 killstreak challenge was the very last camo challenge you'd unlock. So you'd have to focus on actively doing it, which in some weird way would make you get killstreaks way less. But now you can do this killstreak challenge passively from near the start and you won't really have to worry about it at all. Another thing that I like about the camo grind this year is that they've added this new tab which presents your progression with the camo challenges for that gun in a really clear way. I also really enjoy using my handgun in Vanguard. In particular the Rat, it's really fun to spam with and I actually feel like I can take on someone who's using a primary weapon and have a good chance of beating them, which is nice because it means that if I ever get into a situation when my primary runs out of ammo and I don't have the time to reload, I can fall back on my secondary and be as confident with it as I would be with my primary. One thing that in my video I went as far as to say was the biggest problem that Vanguard was facing was there being no factions. I thought that it would lead to a lot of confusion and shooting at teammates you thought were enemies and not shooting at enemies you thought were teammates. But I'd actually like to take this back because there hasn't been a single situation when I've gotten an enemy confused with my teammate, so this isn't a problem at all for me. I still think it's laughably stupid that there's no factions, considering that the Second World War literally had 2 main sides fighting against each other, but it doesn't affect the gameplay at all and that's the most important thing. And finally, for things I like in Vanguard, the slightly slower time to kill definitely makes for more interesting one-on-one gunfights, because in Modern Warfare, if someone shot at you first and you weren't looking in their direction, you were almost 100% going to die. But now, you have a bit more of a chance of surviving and even turning the tables and killing your enemy in those situations. So yeah, those are all the good things I have to say about Vanguard, now moving on to the things I'm not so fond of. Starting things off with what I don't like in Call of Duty Vanguard, and the number one problem I had with Vanguard was the packet burst. And this is a term I've never heard before, but it basically just means my game was a laggy, buggy mess. I'm happy to say that this isn't an issue I have very often anymore, but for the first 3 to 4 days that I had Vanguard, I'd be able to play a couple of matches fine, and then suddenly I'd be hit with this packet burst text on the left of my screen and my latency would go through the roof. My movement would be all jittery and my hit registration would go all wonky, and it was just not a very pleasant experience. And even though this doesn't happen to me very often anymore, so it seems to be fixed, I can't overlook how frustrating it was and how much of a mood killer it was that on the day I got Vanguard, I had to quit the game after less than 2 hours because it was completely unplayable. But my number one problem with Vanguard at the moment would be that the weapons take far too long to level up. It took me 6 to 7 hours to fully level up the automaton, and with a 1 hour double weapon XP token, getting around 50 kills each game, I only got the M1928 Thompson from level 30 to 43. That is ridiculous. I don't know if it's because since there's so many attachments on each weapon, they've had to bump up the weapon level significantly, or if it's because they've just made the weapon XP per kill lower, but it's stupid how long it takes to max level a weapon. And it makes grinding towards it feel really drawn out, and if every weapon takes this long to max level, then I am not looking forward to the atomic grind. Also, while I'm on the topic of weapon XP, the double weapon XP tokens are even worse this year. So as most of you who've been playing COD in recent years should know, with Modern Warfare 2019, they changed it so that double weapon XP tokens count down in real time instead of game time. But the reason I say it's worse this year is because now there's this unskippable player voting thing that they've added at the end of every single game, which further contributes to it taking around 2 minutes between the end of one game and the start of the next. So if you equip a 1 hour double weapon XP token and you get at least 5 games from that, that's 10 minutes of your 60 minutes with double weapon XP completely wasted, which is just plain wrong. And I wouldn't be surprised if they added these voting scenes with the intent of wasting even more time from your double weapon XP tokens. I'm not going to complain about this too much because it's been like this for the past 3 CODs now, so they're not going to change it anytime soon, but I just find it really scummy by Activision. Moving on, the spawns in Vanguard are definitely better than they are in Modern Warfare, but they're still not great. In a lot of maps, you just get spawned in the exact same place over and over, which just leads to enemies mowing you down and you having no time to react. And on shipment, even though I was hopeful that with the angled containers it would allow for better spawns, the spawns are not much better on shipment in Vanguard than they are on shipment in Modern Warfare, unfortunately. And while I'm on the topic of shipment, there's a few more problems I have with it. First off, Team Deathmatch seems to be the only game mode for shipment, and the kill limit is only 100, which is way too short, and it makes the games last for no more than 5 minutes, so I think it should be increased to 200 at the very least, or even 250. And the other problem I have with shipping is where, like I mentioned earlier, you can temporarily go outside the maps to make some cheeky flanks, and I really like this idea, but trying to jump over the barbed wire fence is really awkward and takes multiple attempts most of the time, which sort of ruins the flanks because oftentimes you can't pull it off in the time you want to. Now, despite how much I was singing the praises of the maps earlier, there still are some maps that I don't like in Vanguard. My least favourite maps at the moment are Subpens, Decoy and Oasis. Decoy and Oasis I don't like but can somewhat bear, but Subpens is absolutely awful and it's the only map in the game that I back out if I seem about to play it. Another complaint I have, and it's one of the first things that struck me when I played my first game of Vanguard, and that's that visually this game is a bit more hazy than Modern Warfare was. It doesn't look ugly by any means, but if you put the Vanguard gameplay next to Modern Warfare gameplay, the Modern Warfare gameplay definitely looks more crisp and clean. And this is also the case in the Gunsmith with some weapons, where certain weapons look very blurry. One thing that's very annoying and common enough to run into is that when enemies have a riot shield on their back, their hit registration gets a lot more inconsistent, and shots that I 100% know I would have hit had they not had a riot shield on their back, they don't register. Also, I don't know why they suddenly changed this, but now stuns do loads of damage for some reason. I don't know the exact number, but judging from the red blood visuals that come up on my screen every time I get stunned, stuns get you to around half health, which I find is a bit weird, and I think stuns should do very minimal damage like in Modern Warfare where they only do 2 damage. Now I'm just going to give some minor complaints quickfire that are probably going to get patched soon. Some perks just don't work, or an entirely different perk that you didn't choose would be active instead. The stims animation doesn't sync up with when your health is restored, or they just don't feel as responsive as they did in Modern Warfare. The annoying little green squares that show up even after you've gone over the new thing you've unlocked and you have to hover over multiple of the other little things to get rid of them. And also, I don't think they'll change this anytime soon because I haven't seen anyone talk about it, but Sleight of Hand doesn't seem to give you as much of a faster reload speed as it did in Modern Warfare, and the animations don't seem very different at all, which makes it not nearly as satisfying to use as some of the Modern Warfare guns with Sleight of Hand. Just take a look yourself. And finally, I just wanted to say that when someone calls in a bombing run or a fire bombing run in the middle of Das house, it's annoying as fuck. Because for like 15 seconds, the map is essentially closed down, because as soon as you move anywhere near the middle, you're dead. Not sure how they could fix this, just wanted to mention it because it pisses me off. As for what I'd like to see improved or added to Vanguard, the first thing I'd love to see is a weapon inspect feature. As far as I know, there's been no word on Sledgehammer about weapon inspect feature coming, but I think it would be weird of them to not have it at any point in the game's life cycle, so I think that they'll add it sometime in the near future. And hopefully since they've had this extra time, they'll make clean, nice weapon inspect animations like in Cold War, where they take out the mag or pull back the hammer or slide, and not just boring animations like in Modern Warfare where it just pulls up the gun. It might seem like a small feature, but for me, it would go a long way. And I was going to say it would also be nice to have the ability to create custom mods like in Modern Warfare, but they've just added that now, so fair play. And I haven't used all of them, but judging from the ones I have used, the killstreaks are pretty fun in Vanguard. But I wish there was a killstreak that you could actually control, like the gunship or the chopper gunner from Modern Warfare. Because all the killstreaks, you just call them in and they do their own thing and get you killed, but I find it way more fun to be actually doing the killing instead of calling in something that does it for me. As for what can be improved in Vanguard, it's just all the problems I mentioned earlier. But if it were to just be one thing, it would be how long it takes to level up a weapon. I think they should increase the amount of weapon XP per kill so we can max level our weapons in a respectable amount of time. But as far as stuff to be added to Vanguard, the weapon inspects are the only thing I really want to see added soon. So all things considered, do I enjoy Vanguard's multiplayer more than Modern Warfare's? 100%. It may be because I've burnt out Modern Warfare because I've been playing it very consistently since the start of the year, but I just think that Vanguard's multiplayer feels so much more fresh and games flow so much better than they do in Modern Warfare. Each game feels unique, unlike Modern Warfare where a lot of the times it felt like I was just doing the same thing over and over again. However, all this being said, I don't think my initial experience with Vanguard can even compare with my initial experience with Modern Warfare, because Modern Warfare was my very first COD game and I was learning about all the ins and outs about how multiplayer worked, I was leveling up all my guns for Warzone, and I was way more obsessed with Modern Warfare than I think I'll ever be with Vanguard. So even though Vanguard's multiplayer is overall more fun, Modern Warfare is still my favourite COD, and I don't think that will ever change because people's first COD game that they get is often their favourite one, because it's your introduction to Call of Duty and you're learning everything. And my friends also all got Modern Warfare around the same time as me, and we were playing either Warzone or Modern Warfare literally every single day for the first few months of this year, and we really got into it. And since we've all played Modern Warfare and Warzone so much since then, I don't think we'll ever reach that level of enthusiasm over a COD again. So although I find Vanguard's multiplayer to be more enjoyable and also much less rage-inducing than Modern Warfare's, Modern Warfare will always hold a special place in my heart, and I think it will always be my favourite COD. But the fact that my biggest problem I have in Vanguard is that my weapons level up too slowly, and it's not about huge core elements of the game, speaks volumes about how much Vanguard has improved from the mistakes of the CODs before. And Sledgehammer have been absolutely excellent in dealing with the feedback given by the community, so I'm very hopeful for the future of Vanguard. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please leave it a like, and if you didn't, please leave it a oh wait, never mind, you can just leave it a like as well. And for any of you who have Vanguard, what do you think about the multiplayer? And how do you think it compares to other CODs? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And on the day I'm scripting this video, December 8th, the Warzone integration has just happened, so as I said at the start of the video, I'll be making separate videos on my thoughts on that soon, as well as another separate video giving my thoughts on the Vanguard campaign and zombies. Anyway, that's enough from me. Again, thank you so much for watching, and take care of yourselves.